Shalom. Okay, this is part two of the video I did a couple days ago. Just going over the milk. So this is Hebrew 101 part two. And by the spirit and power of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, I pray that everybody gets edified. The elect, the 1/3 of Israel. And, the Most High let you your attention span retain so you can know who you are. Right? So, let's get started. Now, in the past 1,000 years, the white man has done a marvelous job at setting up strongholds for the black man, woman, and child as how to figure out their identity. But with proper historical context, let's go through all the things we have been called as a people and why they are wrong, right? Let's start off with the most famous term in recent years, African American, right? Famous. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4 through 5. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalted itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ, right? And that's what we're going to do in the spirit and power of Yahweh Ba'ashem Mashiach Yahushua. Okay, so this is where the term African Americans come from. This is a journal article from Negro to Black African American, The Power of Names and Naming by Ben L. Martin, Political Science Quarterly, published by the Academy of Political Science. And they study these things, man. That's what political science is, if anybody asks you this. So in a December 1988 news conference at Chicago's Hyatt Regency O'Hare Hotel, where leaders of 75 black groups met to discuss a new national black agenda, Jesse Jackson announced that members of their race prefer to be called African American. This term was created in 1988. The campaign he then led to replace the term black met immediate success among African American opinion makers and more gradual acceptance in the national press. Jackson's cultural offensive proposed an ethnic reference for a racial one, aiming thereby to help create as much as express a sense of ethnic identity among black Americans. It recalled the successful imposition of black over Negro 20 years earlier and renewed other themes of the Black Power movement of the late 1960s. And now when Jesse Jackson did this and named us the African Americans, since we're not African Americans, the white man didn't have no problem with this, right? He knew we were the Israelites, but he didn't have no problem with this. But now that we're calling ourselves Israelites, now he's calling us black identity extremists. But he's tried to but Jesse Jackson called us African Americans. They didn't call this nigga a black identity extremist. Because people in cahoots, man. And that's for real. That's real deal, though. Now, we know there's no homeland called Africa America. So let's examine the word African American origin, right? In its origin. This is Amerigo Vespucci. Italian, Amerigo Vespucci. He was born March 9th, 1454, and he died February 22nd, 1512. Was an Italian explorer, financier, navigator, and cartographer. Born in the Republic of Florence, he became a naturalized citizen of the Crown of Castile in 1505. And if you look at the definition of cartographer, it's a person who draws or produces maps. The definition that you see below. Around 1502, Slovakia, Vespucci demonstrated that Brazil and the West Indies did not represent Asia's eastern outskirts, as initially conjectured from Columbus's voyage, but instituted an entirely separate and unexplored landmass, colloquially referred to as the New World. It came to be termed the Americas, a name derived from Americus, the Latin version of Vespucci's first name, right? So we got the America part of African American. So let's look at the African part. Origin of the word Africa from the Greeks 2,350 years ago in 331 BC when it was named. And you know that date because it's 2000, because we go off the date from 1 AD. So it's 2019 AD. So you subtract 2019 AD, then you add 331 BC before Christ, and it gets you the year 2,350 years ago. So let's look at it. The Phoenician Afar, dust, the Afri, a tribe, possibly Berber, it means barbaric, who dwelt in North Africa in the Carthage area. The Greek word Afrique, meaning without cold, or the Latin word Africa, meaning sunny. So are you a white man that's not cold? Or are you a white man that's not sunny? Or that's sunny? No, right? Let's examine the term Negro. So that's cut. We not that. Now let's examine the term Negro and its origin. 1736, map of West Africa of Negro land. You see it right there, right? Now let's read. Around 1442, the Portuguese arrived in southern Africa while trying to find a sea route to India. The term Negro, literally meaning black, and we know we're not black, was used by the Spanish and Portuguese as a simple description to refer to the Bantu peoples that they encountered. Now, you have black jeans, you have black cars, but you have brown people. So we're different shades of brown, we're not black. Now let's keep reading. Negro denotes, right, black in Spanish and Portuguese, derived from Negro denotes black in Spanish and Portuguese, derived from the Latin word niger, meaning black, which itself is probably from a Proto-Indo-European root, neek, to be dark, akin to nok, night. Negro was also used of the peoples of West Africa in old maps, labeled Negro land, an area stretching along the Niger River. And it tells you that Niger means black. So the Black River, right? From the 18th century to the late 1960s, Negro, later capitalized, was considered to be proper English language term for people of black African origin in 1960. No, from the 18th century to the late 1960s. So what were we before that? We're going to get into that. Later capitalized was considered to be the proper English language term for people of black African origin. According to the Oxford dictionaries, use of the word now seems out of date or even offensive in both British and English and U.S. English. But Negro just means, but they still call us black. But Negro is offensive. They playing word games, man. All of it's offensive. They calling us everything but the children of God. This is Acts chapter 13, verse 1. Now there were in the church that was at Antioch, in I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's in Turkey or Asia Minor or Anatolia, the same place. That was at Antioch, certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simeon, that was called Niger. What does Niger mean? What does Niger mean? It means Niger, meaning black, right? Niger, the Simeon that was called Niger, and Lucius of Cyrene and Manaen, which had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch and Saul, right? Now, last but not least, let's pull down another stronghold for the so-called black man, whatever that means, woman and child, in finding their true identity, which leads us to the word more, right? Now, you heard of that more, I'm a more, you heard that's very popular now, I'm a more. Moors, you don't gotta get no, I'm a Moorish American, son, I ain't black, I'm a Moor, and get pulled over by the damn police because your ass don't want to get a license. This is Moor, a Muslim of the mixed Berber and Arab people inhabiting Northwest Africa. A member of this group that invaded Spain in the 8th century AD and occupied it until 1492, because the Moors and the Jews and the Arabs were kicked out of that land in 1492. Mostly the Jews, though. Origin of Moor: 13 to 50 to 14 to the 1400s. Middle English, Moor. Middle French variant of Moor, Latin Morris, Greek Morris. Goes back to the Greek word Morris. Etymology: the study. Now let's look this up before we get into anything else. Etymology: the study of the origin of words and the way in which their meanings have changed throughout history. Second definition: the origin of a word and the historical development of its meaning. Now let's look at the etymology of the word Moor. Etymology: from Low German Moraean, Moor, Negro, or German Moor. It just means black, because it means Moor. Moor means Negro. Negro means black. Same thing. Dated. Black person. Same thing, man. They're just coming up with they just calling you the same thing in different languages. This is the book Nature Knows No Color Line. English, 18th century. This is the 18th century Black Queen on the front cover if you want to know who that is. England's 8th century Black Queen Sophia Charlotte born. So let's look at the book. Chapter 5, this is page 55. Racial intermixture in Spain and Portugal. While white Vandals were pouring into Africa in the 4th and 5th centuries, Africans continued to arrive in southern Europe, chiefly as slaves. But in 711 AD, they came in as conquerors. Crossing into Spain, they captured Gibraltar and defeated the Goths, white Germanic invaders of 3 centuries earlier. Their commander, Tariq, a Negro, gave his name to Gibraltar, formerly, before it was known as Gibraltar, Kelp it was known as. These Africans were Moors, sometimes called Arabs because of their language. To the earlier Greeks, the Moors were a black or dark people. Moros, we just read that in the definition. And to the Romans, Moris, a black woolly-haired people, and Christ was known as having woolly hair. A black woolly-haired people known synonymously as Ethiops, but Christ wasn't an Ethiopian, he was a Hebrew. Niger, we see it again, Niger, Negro, and a fur, African. Even as late as the 5th century AD, Procopius, a Roman historian, calls the people of Morocco black, right? And they were only said to be Muslims because they spoke Arab languages, because the Arabs were invading at that time. About the 2nd century BC, before Christ, began invasions of white people into Morocco. The Romans, who called it Mauritania, came in, and it is to be presumed that their soldiers mixed with Moorish women. Julius Caesar himself had a Moorish queen as sweetheart. Later came the Vandals, a white people who were for a time allies with the Moors against Rome. Still later came Islamic invaders. Who are Islamic invaders at this time? Arabs, whose ancestors for 30 centuries had been a mixture of white and black. Due to these invasions of lighter colored people, the Moors of the 8th century AD were probably about the color of the native population of Casablanca or Fez. That's why you see Moors wearing fezzes on their head. In fact, it goes on by the description of white. Right? Okay, that's the end of that. So this is the end of that. This is comely, just because I'm about to go to another slide. Comely, pleasurable, conforming to notions of good appearance, suitable or proportion, handsome, having a pleasure appearance, not homely or plain. Comely, typically, pleasant to look at, attractive. There was something I wanted about that. Let me go back. It's all good. Let me see. I'm gonna go back. See if I can find it. Okay, this is what I want. This is the slide I want. This is the Shakespeare and the Jews. This is page 107 of this book. This is a good book. The Jews in the Dark Ages. And let's read what this quote of Paul Isaiah in the year 1655. Race. I knew you to be a Jew, for you Jews have a peculiar color of face different from the form and figure of other men, which thing hath often filled me with admiration, for you are black and uncomely. Now, we just read that comely means good to look at. So he's insulting them, because if you're uncomely, that means you're not good to look at. For you are black and uncomely and not white as other men. This is what he's saying about the Jews. Contemporary meaning contemporary scholars mean scholars at the same time, at the same date, living at the same time. Contemporary scholars have traced the origins of modern racism and nationalism back to the 16th century, a time when European nations were coming into contact on an unprecedented scale with other peoples. Indeed, they are quick to point that the words themselves, race as well as nation, only began to inquire their current meaning at this time by separating black and white and all this. You know what I'm saying? And the person who made, y'all can look this up. Johann Blumenbach. He created the term of race and things like that. But let's go back. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, okay. Now, this question brings us to the main. Dang, what was it? I got my notes everywhere, man. Hold on, Salakia. We going too far. Okay, well, we going too far. Okay, well, now, hold on. Okay. Well, it's all good. We're going to finish it out. Let me see. Salaki Israel. All right, well, okay, so there was a slide before it that said, okay, so if we're not African or American or black or Negro, what are we? Now let's get into this slide. Well, this question brings us to the man named Jacob, twin sons of Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Esau, right? We know who Esau is, the so-called white man from the last video. If you don't know it, go back to it. Part 1 of this video. This is a book, From Babylon to Timbuktu, a history of history of ancient black races, including the Black Hebrews, by Rondell R. Windsor. Designed, give my boy credit. Designed by L. Hagen. That's what his name is. That's 2 N's. Okay, this page 107. We're gonna look at the last couple sentences of this page. The wars with Rome compelled hundreds of thousands more to escape into North Africa. During the Punic Wars and after North Africa contained a large Hebrew population. This Hebrew population made converts and intermarried with the Canaanites and the native Africans. And the Punic Wars was a time from 264 BC to 146 BC. And you can look that up yourself. Hannibal was a Hebrew. Let's read. And if you want to know what AD means, it means Anno Domini. AD stands for Anno Domini, which is Latin for year of our Lord. So AD means year of our Lord. It means Anno Domini, and Anno Domini means year of our Lord in Latin. So let's read the famous same book, different page. So let's read the highlighted part. In the year 65 BC, before Christ was on the scene, the Roman armies under General Pompey captured Jerusalem. In 70 AD, General Vespasian and his son Titus put an end to the Jewish state with great slaughter. During the period of the military governors of Palestine, many outrages and atrocities were committed against the residue of the people that stayed. During the period from Pompey to Julius, it has been estimated that over 1 million Jews fled into Africa. Fleeing from Roman persecution and slavery, the slave markets were full of black Jewish slaves. So we read that in 264 BC and 146 BC, we went into Africa, into Carthage, and in 70 AD, we went there. Now, this is From Babylon to Timbuktu, page 87. Let's read the highlighted, the underlined parts. Throughout the Middle Ages, many European governments expelled their Jews. These black Jews migrated to neighboring countries, Turkey and Africa. So not only were they in Africa, they in Turkey. Now, another part, the Byzantine empires, or the Eastern empires, in the 5th and 6th centuries, from 5th and 6th centuries AD, I think, persecuted the Jews constantly. Therefore, the multitude of Jews were compelled to migrate into the Sahara Desert. And what do they call Africans? They call us sub-Saharan Africans. To migrate into the Sahara Desert to the south. By this time, the Sahara Desert was heavily occupied with black Jews, right? And just to get a little bit more history of why we were called Arabs because of our language, the Arabs pushed their way out of Arabia in the 7th century because we came into conquerors in Spain in 711 AD, and the 711 AD is that's the 8th century. So this is the 7th century, 600 AD to 700 AD. That's the 7th century. And 700 AD to 800 AD is the 8th century. So the Arabs pushed their way out of Arabia in the 7th century in the year 640 AD. They attacked Egypt and continued across Africa. Then a Jewish queen named Dia Kahina organized an army consisting of Jews because we went there, because we were expelled there, and Berbers in order to stop the penetration of the Muslims in North Africa. This queen vanquished the Arabs, and the people of Africa rejoiced in her victory. Years later, the Mohammedans fought the army of this Jewish queen once more, and she was defeated. She was defeated the second time because of the jealousy of different people in various tribes. Having become disgusted, her son turned Muslim and participated in the Islamic conquest of Spain in the year 711 AD, right? And you have the Black Jewish Empire of Ghana, but we're not going to get in there now. Just to let you know what the Byzantine Empire is. Chronology of Byzantine Empire. It was from 330 A.D. to 453 A.D. A little bit before we went into slavery in 1492 A.D. Constantine founds the new capital of the Roman Empire on the existing site of the ancient Greek city Byzantium. The city of the capital. Byzantium was renamed Constantinople, and it would be Constantinople known as today is Istanbul. It would become the capital of the Byzantine Empire. Now let's read. The Byzantine Empire, also referred to the Eastern Roman Empire and Byzantium, this capital, was the continuation of the Roman Empire in its eastern provinces during late antiquity and the Middle Ages. When its capital city was Constantinople, modern day faith Istanbul, like I said, and formerly before that Byzantium. It survived the fragmentation and fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century A.D. and continued to exist for an additional 1,000 years until it fell to the Ottoman Turks in 1453. During most of its existence, the empire was the most powerful economic, cultural, and military force in Europe. Both the terms Byzantium and Eastern Roman Empire are historiographically exonyms. Its citizens continue to refer to their empire simply as the Roman Empire. And there you go. Romania and to themselves as Romans. There you go. Name. Now, this is a slave. Now, this is a picture of a 1747 map of Africa. This is present-day Benin. This is Wuda. Kingdom, that KM up there, means Kingdom of Judah, or Wuda, Slave Coast. Name. The name Wuda, also spelled Huda, Wuda, Uda, Wuda, and Judah, is an angelicized form of Exda, pronounced Ouida, from the Yoruba language of Benin. Today, the port city of Yoda, means Judah, bears the kingdom's name. It is in the far west of the former Popo Kingdom, and is where most of the European slave traders lived and worked. The area gives its name to the native Wuda bird, to the pirate Captain Black. Now, Judah, it's talking about Judah, right? The tribe of Judah. And this is where it is if you want to see it in proportion. You got Spain up here, damn near touching Africa, and you got Benin. And that's where that slave port is. Portuguese, here we go, Benin. Cuda, right? You see it down there. It's a slave coast. Merchants and explorers, 1500s. Portuguese merchants and explorers arrived along the coast. 1620, King Doko of Abomi founded Kingdom of Dahomey. English built fort at Wida, right? So let's look at 1620. This is from the book Lost Tribes and Promised Lands: The Origins of American Racism. Ronald Sanders, page 342. We're gonna start at we're gonna read this whole last paragraph. The transition into a slaveholding mentality was a rather sudden one from the English, and the conditions of it must remain somewhat mystifying for all time. We have seen the very different outlook of a Sir Francis Drake. We can in fact note the presence of an attitude similar to his among Englishmen engaged in significant imperial activity. Salakia. What was that? Engaged in a significant imperial activity as late as 1620s. Now, as late in the 1620s, it says in that year, 1620, a company for the countries of Guinea and Benin that we just looked at sent a ship, the Zion, to get slaves from Judah. They knew who they was getting, man, to the Gambia River in an attempt to get at the sources of the West African trade there too, dominated by the Portuguese and Spain, right? And we already read that. Now, Zion. Now, well, let me get it. This is for 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 1 through 7. Just to let you know what Zion comes from. Then came all the tribes of Israel to David unto Hebron, the city, and spake, saying, Behold, we are thy bone and thy flesh. Bone and thy flesh means I'm related to you. Also, in times past, when Saul was king over when Saul was king over us, thou was he that led us out and brought us in Israel. And the Lord said to thee, Thou shalt feed my people Israel, and thou shalt be a captain over Israel. So all the leaders of Israel came to the king to Hebron, and King David made a league with them in Hebron before the Lord. And they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. And in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem unto the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land of Jerusalem, which spake unto David, saying, Except thou take away the blind and the lame, thou shalt not come in hither. Thinking David cannot come in hither. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, the same is the city of David. So they went into the Jebusites and took the city, and the Jebusites were dwelling in Jerusalem. And he took the city and he called it Zion, the same as the city of David. So I just wanted to point something out real quick. Now, Jerusalem is Zion, and Jerusalem is damn near is in the lot of Benjamin, of the tribe of Benjamin, but it's damn near Judah. So these white people knew what they were doing when they came and got us, man. Right? You can't deny that, man. And I'm gonna stop right there. Shalom. So meditate on that, man. And after that, we're gonna go to these curses, starting from Deuteronomy 28 to 15. And we're going to try to get all of them in there by the Spirit and power of Yahweh by Shem Yahushai. If that wasn't enough evidence to prove that you're a Hebrew Israelite, then this will. And then we're going to keep pouring it out, because this ain't stopping. This artifacts, this history, this evidence is coming in like a flood. So with that, I want to give all praises to Yahweh by Hashem Mashiach Yahushai. Shalom.